So I am on my VC. All of my hosts are already on. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to log in. I'm doing lab 18, which is going to be a random selection of miscellaneous VMware tasks. One of the first ones we're going to be doing is we're going to be mapping a RDM mapping. So while this is powering on, you may get a activation failure. Just ignore them. I'm going to be adding in a 12 gig LUN. Add a new hard drive. It'll be a new virtual disk. Because my machine is powered on, it has to be iSCSI, which that's okay. We're going to have that 12 gigs. We're going to call it RDM. And because it's already powered on, our disk management is actually should be able to see it automatically. If it doesn't, you can always right click on it, refresh or rescan disks. That's how you can force a repopulation. We have to initialize it. So you're going to have to right click right underneath the red arrow, initialize disk. Which one do we want to turn on? It happens to be disk 4. We're going to do it in BR. Okay, we're also going to do a new simple volume. We're going to leave all the basics. We're going to give it the drive letter R. We are going to call it RDM. Do a quick format. And that should be ready to go. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of it. It's almost done formatting, so I'll just give it a second. So I'm going to go ahead and open up our Starwind Manager. Because the machine has not been on, you're going to have to go ahead and connect our VC. If you get a not able to connect, be patient, just try to reconnect it again. We're going to be setting up a new target, so go to target, add device. We're going to leave it as disk drive. We're going to leave it a basic virtual disk. We're going to call it a image file. We're going to create a new virtual disk. We're going to put it on our R drive. We are going to call it rdm.image, rdm.img, rdm.img. We're going to put the size to 10 gigs. We're going to go ahead and leave the defaults here, so it will be compressed, not encrypted. That's fine. Again, we're going to leave all the defaults. Again, defaults. For our alias, we're going to call it RDM. And we're also going to check allow multiple concurrent iSCSI connections. Again, here you can see our iSCSI LUN, our identifier. That's all good. Go to next. We will again double check our settings. That's all good. Here is our iSCSI target name. That's all good. We'll go ahead and finish. And we should be good with that part. We're going to go ahead and move this slightly to the side. And we're going to be opening up our VMware client. And we're going to be logging into our vCenter. Again, a single sign-on should be enabled, so just log in. Within our nested environment, sometimes this takes a little while, so just gotta be patient. So within our environment, we're going to go back to our home page. hosts and clusters. And from here, we're going to be editing our enterprise version of Windows 7. So that'd be E732C. We want to actually add an additional hard drive. Hard drive. Next, we're going to be creating a new virtual disk. I went one too far. I'm sorry. Out of habit, it should actually already be checked. Just because we added it to our iSCSI does not mean that they were automatically given to our hosts. So I got way ahead of myself. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. Let's set up our ESXi hosts so that we can rescan them, because again, we only have our 3 LUNs. So over in storage, let me maximize my screen. Over in storage, let's go ahead and rescan, because we should have our raw map drive. So it just took a little bit. It actually does populate our additional 10 gig iSCSI line. It took a little while. So I'm going to double check to make sure that it's on our second host. Refresh it. I had to refresh it a few times before it populated, but it does populate. So I'm going to give this a little bit more time and I'll come back to it. But we're going to go back to our E732C and go back to its edit settings. We're going to add in a hard drive like we were doing before. Now we should have our raw device mapping. This gives our VM direct access to our storage. This allows us to use existing SAN commands to manage the storage. It basically allows you to use a volume directly, not having to go through additional management. Because like right now, yes, we're using a SAN, but it goes our SAN, those drives are formatted, we then partition out the volume space on them, and then we actually have our VMFS on them. So we go through multiple layers trying to manage that, and it's just all additional overhead and wasted space. So from here, raw device mapping, you will be able to select your raw map. That should be 10 gigs, which it is. Go and make sure it's selected. Next, make sure that we are storing this with our virtual machine. So make sure the default is still selected. Next, for our raw mapping, we want more physical compatibility, which that's fine. We want to give it our device node. Because it is added as an iSCSI, our iSCSI gives us the options to do 16 IDs per controller, and here there's probably 2 controllers, or 4 controllers, 0, 1, 2, 3. So when we do this, you actually have to make sure that our SCSI IDs are different from other machines sometimes, because within our virtual environment, it gets really interesting to try to have SCSI IDs that are on the same type of virtual channel, because within our hosts sometimes get them confused. So I've noticed that sometimes actually editing the host adapter that they're on, so that they're not all on adapter 0, sometimes has some benefits. Wanted to put that out there. I had a specific example in my mind. I cannot remember what I was talking about. So, fun times. So go ahead and leave that default. That's fine. Next, review and finish. we want to make sure that our CD/DVD is not going to any type of device. We specifically do not want it pointed to a data store. That's important. And click OK. Let it generate and reconfigure the machine, and we're now in task 3. Before we can go on to task 3, let's make sure that our settings work. Let's power on our Windows 7 or our E732C machine. Because we mapped it as a raw file type, we actually want to make sure that it's actually allowing files to be saved correctly. So as I start my Windows 7 machine, it should only take a second. I'm going to go into it and expand its disk management. It should have a 10 gig LUN for disk 1. That's right. Should show online. We need to do a simple volume on it. Again, leaving it about 10 gigs. Give it the drive letter E, so that's fine. Let it format, and then I will copy a folder and call it test. Just that way we can see that we can write data to it. And we can, so we are good. Go ahead and minimize our Windows 7 Enterprise VM, because we're going to need it open for the next part. We just don't need it currently active on our screen. Can we on the fly increase space? So when we did our Windows 7 machine, we did a 16 gig hard drive. But can we do more? So let's bump it up to 25. Let it reconfigure. Now let's go back to our Windows 7 machine. C drive still shows our 16 gigs. Let's go ahead and go back to our computer management, back to our disk management. Let's go ahead and rescan disk. There's our additional unallocated space that already populated. So we actually want to extend our volume. So in the blue active area, extend volume. And we want to extend it fully. So we want to add all 9 gigs to it. And now it's one large 25 gig volume. So when we start adding resources, we could do it on the fly. With hard drive space, it's very easy within Windows. However, I have done this on a Linux machine, and it was not so easy. So bear that in mind. So we are done with our Windows 7 machine, but let's see if we can view this within our storage maps. So I'm going to go back to our ESX hosts, go to storage view, and I want to click on maps. I want to see kind of how everything is relating back to our guy. And here you can see that this is our virtual machine, and it is connected to our ESXi 2 host. It's connected to our iSCSI 2 LUN. I'm going to update the view, and yeah. So where is our rest of our LUNs? They're all part of our iSCSI 2 storage. So keep that in mind. What happens if we want to just kind of focus on our E7 32-bit? We can actually go to our Maps tab, and we can kind of see where our virtual machines are being stored, what networks they're connected to, all of that overhead. So interesting things with seeing our maps. I always tell people that you should at least look through these. That way we can kind of see what we're dealing with, and we can see our complex view of our virtual infrastructure. It's not overly complex, but I mean it takes a while to get used to. I actually want to see all data stored and all virtual machines as well. Update. There's our Windows Enterprise, there's our Windows XP, those are all of our mappings for our storage. So again, pretty interesting view here. So with that, we are done with our Enterprise 7. Let's go ahead and shut it down. We're going to send a shutdown command to it, let it power off. So we're going to go navigate back to our host and cluster view, which is this view. Once our Windows machine is shut off, we're actually going to go to our Summaries tab so that we can see all general resources assigned to our individual VMs. Here we can see our provision storage, our not shared storage. We can see all of our detailed info. If we have multiple LUNs or multiple networks, all of that will be here. So we actually want to browse our iSCSI 2 LUN, and there we see our E732C, and there are all of our files for that. We did this as a thin provision. Is there a way for us to actually edit it so that this is going to be a thick provision? So if we wanted to do that, we'd go back to where we were, select our storage, browse data store, browse to wherever our VM is stored. We actually want to look at our virtual hard drive, our VMDK, and you can right click and you can inflate. It's provisioned to 26 gigs. Currently it's only using 5.7 gigs. So if we inflate it, we can actually force it to use or partition out all 25 gigs. We're not going to do that. It's just, if we wanted to, we could. If you copy over VMs in this area, you could also add these to inventory by right-clicking on the appropriate VMX file and add to inventory. This is our inventory pane. So if you want to add anything over here, right-click, add to inventory, because this is normally what we refer to as our inventory. Okay, so we're done with this portion. We're going to go on to the last portion, which is how do we hot swap or hot add memory and hot add processors. So first thing we have to realize is we have to turn on the ability to hot plug devices in. So we're going to go and right click on this guy. Let's look at its properties. Sorry, not properties. We're going to look at its settings first. So edit settings. We're going to go to our options. And in here, this is where we'll actually be able to add in additional advanced features. We are looking at specifically our memory / CPU hot plug, and we can turn it on for memory, for CPU, one or the other, both. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn it on for both. Let it reconfigure. Once it's reconfigured, go and turn it on. So without this feature turned on, you cannot quickly add those resources. When it is turned on, you can add processors and memory to it. So while this is powering on, I'm going to go ahead and expand my console view while it loads. Again, because of the timing, you may get an activation pop-up. Just ignore them for our test environment. So right now, our virtual machine has a single processor. We're going to go to Device Manager just to verify this. Processor, just one. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my virtual machine edit settings. And I actually want to add in a second virtual socket. Notice it's going to reconfigure. I'm going to go back to my Windows 7 host. Go back to our device manager. And let's see what our device manager shows. On the fly, we were able to add in a second processor. Removing it is not always as simple, but it's interesting because you have to make sure the machine is off before you can apply it. But as long as it's checked, you can actually see that it's kind of useful when you want to add an additional resource or resources, depending. So one thing I do want to point out though, why does Task Manager show only one processor when we just seen that it has two? Task Manager will not update with the second processor until you restart your VM. So that's pretty much it for this lab. Let's go ahead and close everything. Shut down our Windows 7 machine. Let's re-edit it so that we put it back down to one processor. Notice we cannot take it down. You can add the resources, but you cannot remove those resources. Once it's completely powered off, then we can go ahead and edit them and lower them. But with it powered on, we don't have that option. And that's it for Lab 18. Thank you.